Brett, paint the picture for us on this historic night. What happened?
He called it one of the worst fights ever.
DC was DC. You know, the thing about him, especially when he fought at heavyweight years ago, was that he always had terrific hand speed. And I just wondered, though, has the heavyweight division changed? Is it more athletic than it used to be? And Daniel Cormier, 39, would he still have that blazing hand speed? He had it against Stipe Miocic. He even said it after the fight. He said, we noticed that Stipe, when he backs up out of a clinch, he keeps his hands down, and he was quick with the punch. And that heavyweight division, man, we say it all the time, that punch lands, Stipe went out, and DC is a two-weight champion. It was unbelievable. It was an absolutely unbelievable night for Daniel Cormier.
Again, a thunderbolt of a right hand. He followed it up, pounced him on the ground, but Miocic was out on the ground, and that did that. Cormier is now a two-division champion, only the second man, along with Conor McGregor, to do that simultaneously as an active fighter. Brett, you know, when you think about his great career, I'm curious to get your perspective. How does this fight define his career?
I'll tell you what, it just shows how quickly things can change in the fight game. 1 year ago, Daniel Cormier fought Jon Jones, who was arguably the greatest fighter of all time, for the second time. He had lost to him previously, and this was his last shot. You know, Daniel Cormier was a guy who lost to the great Chael Sanderson. He was a collegiate wrestler. He went to the Olympics but never medaled. And now he came in to the UFC in a mixed martial arts career, and he accomplished a whole lot, but he just couldn't quite beat the great Jon Jones. And so 1 year ago, after he got knocked out by Jon Jones, he was in the octagon crying. He said, there's no rivalry now. There will be no third fight. And your heart broke a little bit for Daniel Cormier. Now here we are 1 year later. The guy is a two-weight champion. Jon Jones is still suspended. We're still waiting to find out exactly for how long. But Daniel Cormier has taken everything. He has taken over the heavyweight division, the light heavyweight division, and now possibly is he going to fight Brock Lesnar after this?
Pay respects to what Daniel Cormier just accomplished. He just knocked out Stipe Miocic in the first round. Gil, are you surprised he did it like that?
I am very surprised he did it that way. I thought he was going to have to wrestle, grind him out. But in fact, he knocked out what I thought was the better boxer. This might have been the single most important moment for any fighter in the MMA game in the octagon.
Ariel, I'm so impressed. I want to give the credit to DC. I'm well aware he deserves it. But what about me as a fan, guys? I feel a little bit let down. I wanted to see more minutes. I was enjoying that contest. Stipe was even doing a little bit of out-wrestling of Daniel, which surprised us. And then Daniel, of course, gets Stipe with the punches. This was a reverse of the way we predicted it to happen. Great night for Daniel. I wanted more minutes.
Chael, I had the privilege of watching the fight with you, and you were telling me early on this is not going Daniel's way. How did he turn it around like that?
Yeah, listen, so they were in a clinch, and anytime we see this in fighting, a combat of any kind, and one punch and we see that big knockout, we always leave the fans with what I'm expressing, which is I just want a little bit more. Could have that happened? Was it a lucky punch? I don't know that we can answer those questions, but to your point, look, Stipe came out, he looked like the bigger fighter. He had the height, but he didn't quite have the weight, but he looked like he did. He uses his leverage. He was getting what we call an underhook, digging underneath Daniel's arm, pushing him into the fence, what we usually see DC doing to other guys. DC was also backing up what DC usually likes to do to other guys. Things were really looking good for Stipe. They were in a clinch, and all of a sudden, they weren't looking so good.
Guys, we have highlights of what just guys, yesterday we talked about how DC looked on the scale. We talked about the fact that the last time he fought as a heavyweight back at UFC 166, he weighed 20 pounds less than he did when he weighed in yesterday. What did you think of the bigger DC here tonight?
Well, apparently it worked just fine. You know, DC was happy being 240 pounds. Maybe he felt relaxed, didn't have the pressure of cutting weight. We've seen him on the scale the last few times at 205 pounds. He did not feel good. And I think being a heavyweight, not having that on your mind, cutting that weight, it helped him out. I personally thought I liked him a little bit leaner, but he did well, and he landed that big power punch and probably had that weight on him, probably made a difference.
We'll get to what's next for DC in a second, but do you think after this result, considering how he looked on the scale yesterday, considering how he fought tonight, we'll never see him fight again at 205?
Oh, no, forget it. I'm glad you brought that up. I think that's a whole talking point. What's going to happen in that division? Absolutely not. I don't even think he'll be offered a fight at 205. I suspect he will be stripped of that title as soon as tonight. Now, I'm probably a little bit ahead of myself, but I can almost assure you within the week, that belt's up for grabs.
One of the best things about the fight game, guys, in my opinion, is debating who's the greatest of all time. Everyone has a say. Probably second best is the pound-for-pound debate. Now that he did it, now that he's just the second guy to ever hold two belts at the same time, where does DC fall on that Mount Rushmore? Is he number one, number two, number three? What do you think?
You know, what makes it interesting is the fact that he's a heavyweight. You know, and the heavyweight is always the toughest man on the planet. You know, if you can be 145-pound champ, 155-pound, you're still not the toughest man on the planet. Being a heavyweight and doing what he did, I think it's up for talks. I mean, there's definitely room for debate, but what he did tonight, could be the best thing for the heavyweight division, or best thing any fighter has ever done.
And Ariel, you say it's a fun topic to have the greatest of all time. It's a topic that drives me nuts. There's no tournament called pound for pound. There's no way to prove it. There's no fight you can enter. It's nothing but discussion. It's nothing but a popularity contest. But I have to establish that to make you guys understand. It's just a respect factor. Think of the toughest guy in your high school. Everybody at home, do the same thing. Now I'll ask you a question. Who did you ever see that guy beat up? And everybody's going, I never saw anybody beat him up. He was the toughest guy in school. No one would challenge him. Exactly. You don't actually know. It's a respect thing. There was an intimidation that Mike Tyson brought, which raised him up the ranks and kept him believed forever. In this case with Daniel Cormier, he's a nice guy. He doesn't bring intimidation. He's soft-spoken. He's a sweet guy. He goes home to his family at the end of the night. So for those very reasons, he doesn't have that respect. I think on paper, to what you're saying, I think you make a very compelling argument. He hasn't lost a fight that doesn't have an asterisk next to it. He hasn't lost a fight that wasn't a world title fight. He's got it in 2 different divisions. The other side of it is he came in tonight looking like a bowling ball. He was short. He was wide. He gained too much weight. But optics matter when you're talking about the pound-for-pound debate. And no matter how many people he puts to sleep, he just isn't going to be feared, and it's going to take him out of the conversation, which I think is wrong, but it takes him out.